have a special report. Toss it back to the desk right now.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell in Washington, along with Gail King in Minneapolis, and we are coming on the air with breaking news. The jury has reached a verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial. It happened relatively quickly and without any questions from the jury.
Nora, it's one of those things that you dropped whatever you were doing. We just received word. We rushed over here, and here we are. The verdict comes on the first full day of deliberations. Chauvin, as you know, faced 3 counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Now, as we wait to hear the verdict, I can tell you this. The atmosphere in Minneapolis is extremely tense, but I can also say it's very hopeful. Many businesses have been boarded up, that's clear to see. Thousands of National Guard troops are deployed, that's very clear to see too. And the area around the courthouse is very, very tightly secured. Police are on alert in many other cities ahead of this verdict.
You know, Gail, I know you watched this as closely as I did, this whole trial. Many Americans tuning in, as this was the first time a trial in Minnesota like this had been televised. And the most important evidence in this trial was that video with former Officer Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck for about 9.5 minutes. And of course, you heard it too. The prosecution said, believe your eyes, trust your gut on this one, while the defense tried to distract and say there were other causes for George Floyd's death. I wonder, Gail, as you talk to people, what's their sense about how much this verdict means to people, about what the jury decides? I mean, it's monumental, isn't it?
You know, it's interesting, Nora. We actually went to the George Floyd Park today and spent a lot of time with the people there. They were chanting, they were praying, they were saying his name. Somebody said to me, this is God's will, whatever happens. God's hand is all in this, and we have to trust that God will do the right thing. You know, I think many people are encouraged that the verdict came so quickly. You know, you can read a lot of things into that, but the bottom line is that there are 12 people. It's sort of like 12 wild cards, and only they know at this moment what that verdict is. So while people are trying not to be too excited, I can tell you people are very optimistic at this moment. Jamie Yuccas, who has been covering this trial since day one, is here. Nora, I think she probably knows a little bit more than you and I do, because we've all been covering this very, very closely. But Jamie Yuccas, this is your hometown. How did you receive word? What were you told?
I actually have a couple of friends who work for the Hennepin County government, and so what we were told is that they would get notified when a verdict came in, because they wanted all employees out of the government buildings, out of the courthouse, and they want employees to go home. So I got notified by some friends who work at the courthouse saying, we've gotten a verdict, we've been told to go home, the verdict is in. And that was around 2 o'clock local time, 3 o'clock Eastern. So that happened relatively quickly. They thought it would take about an hour. It seems that that's the case, since they're saying we could now have this verdict read within the next 25 minutes or so. So that's how I received word today about it.
You know, there's all sorts of speculation too, that when the verdict comes back this quickly, that is probably a good sign for the prosecution. But I was talking to a police officer friend of mine just before I came. They said not so quickly, because you have to be able to prove intent. But that's not necessarily the case, isn't it? Unintentional murder is one of the charges here.
Well, so the interesting thing about this is the prosecution's burden of proof is actually pretty low in terms of the standards of the charges, because they don't have to say that Derek Chauvin, strictly his knee, caused George Floyd's death, just that it was a contributing factor to George Floyd's death. So the defense brought up all of these number of issues, including carbon monoxide poisoning, heart disease, underlying health conditions, drug use. The prosecution can say, yeah, all those were a factor, but it was his knee on the neck was a contributing factor as well, and you must find him guilty of murder.
Yeah, and they also said that even if it had been a healthy man with no underlying conditions, no drug issues, no carbon monoxide poisoning, that even a healthy man or a healthy person would have been taken down by this. Nora?
All right, Gail King and Jamie Yuccas there. He was hearing in my ear that the jury is in the room now. We are moments away from the verdict. Of course, law enforcement across this